Good morning, everyone. My name is Miss Shevon Nedd, and today this morning, I'll be your chairperson. Um, can you join me in standing as we sing the first and last stanza of the national anthem? For those who are at the back, can you come forward and fill the seats in front? We have some seats in front. Can you come forward? Thank you. Dear land of Guyana, of rivers and plains, made rich by the sunshine and lush by the rain, sad gem-like and fair, between mountains and seas, your children salute you, dear land of the free. Dear land of Guyana, to you will we give our homage, our service, each day that we live. God guard you, great mother, and make us to be more worthy our heritage, land of the free. Thank you. You may have your seats. Now I'll invite the ISKCON of Guyana Hare Krishna study for prayers.
Morning, I'm Prabhudev or Prabhupada Devadas. Please, you can be seated. We'll do a few short prayers. Om Jnana Timidandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshudunmilitam Yena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkness of ignorance, and my spiritual master opened my eyes with the torch of knowledge. Therefore, we offer our respectful obeisances to our great teachers. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. O energy of the Lord, O all attractive Supreme Lord, O all merciful, all pleasing Supreme Godhead, please engage us in your service. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. This morning, I'd like to acknowledge our Vice-Chancellor, Professor Paloma Mohamed Martin, our guest speaker, Professor Gupta, and members of the ISKCON of Guyana Hare Krishna Study Center, and each and every one of you who took time out to be here. It is great to see all of you here for what promises to be a fascinating discussion. Today we are diving into a topic that has sparked debate, curiosity, deep reflection for centuries, where science and religion intersect. We are honored to have Professor here with us today as he shares his insight, and I encourage you to really engage with the ideas presented, whether it is challenging, challenges what you believe or reinforces it. Before we hear from our guest speaker, I would like to welcome our Vice-Chancellor as she brings welcome remarks.
Thank you. Good morning. Our acting PRO, Ms. Nedd, thanks very much. Guruji from the ISKCON Center, Dave, as we know him, our good friend, esteemed Professor Gupta, members, I think I saw director of the Institute for Distance and Continuing Education. She should be sitting in front. Dr. Jackie Murray just walk in. Members of ISKCON and students, members of the university community, both here and online. We'd like to thank you very much for joining us this morning at what is really short notice. Professor Guruji asked me, I think it was Sunday afternoon, if we would be able to host an event where we could listen to the wisdom of Professor Gupta. And he's leaving the country tomorrow, so it had to be either yesterday or today. And I thought, okay, we'll give it a shot and see. So I'm really delighted and thankful to those who have pulled all the stops to get this simple but important event out this morning. So my staff in the Vice-Chancellor's office, Joelle, Keon, Latoya, Christine, and of course our custodial staff who are responsible for fixing the room, Mr. Joseph and his team, and of course DECC, which is the Department of Conferences, Events and Communications. So we have Miss Nedd, we have Jai somewhere, and we have their team that's streaming this. Oh, here's Jai sitting in the front. We have the team streaming this so that those who are not able to come, leave their offices to come, and they can also, those who want to see it later on can see it. So we'll make the video available. That's one of the beautiful things of our time, that we could have 2 or 3 bites at the cherry and apple, you know. We begin Interreligious Week next week, I believe. And so this is a little precursor, I believe, to a series of activities that the university is collaborating with other partners on the Interreligious Organization of Guyana. And of course, we have a very diverse community on our campus of all various belief systems. And under our regulations, and of course the Constitution of Guyana, these are all respected and allowed their space to practice as they wish. Today's topic, we had 6 topics to choose from first. We chose one yesterday, and then all of a sudden in the afternoon, they said, no, we're not doing that one. We're doing this one. I'd like to hear a little bit more as to why we chose this one. But basically, fundamentally, you know, many debates, centuries-long debates have been perpetuated as to whether or not there's a conflict between science and religion, whether or not it is anti-God and anti-belief to do science and to believe in science. And my own life and my own thought process is that there's absolutely no contradiction between what is in the physical world and what is in the spiritual world. I believe that God created everything and everyone, and so there is no conflict there. And the things that we use science to understand are just unlocking the mysteries of faith and of God. That's how I see things. I could be very wrong because, of course, many people say, no, you know, you cannot be a scientist because that means that you're undermining the faith and you're not, you know, you're doing all kinds of things that man is not expected and supposed to do. But if you believe that all things flow from a good and gracious God, then those who are given the wisdom and the direction, guidance to unlock mysteries, then I believe that could come from God as well. But it is going to be a debate that will not end today. It certainly will not be a debate that ends with me, but it is certainly something, a food for thought. And so, ladies and gentlemen, I thank you for coming. I thank you for thinking of the university. And we look forward to hearing much more about this very, very intriguing topic that you've chosen. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Professor Paloma, for those welcome words. I too tend to agree with Professor when she spoke about not believing that there's a conflict between religion and science. So I am quite intrigued as to what will come out of today's discussion. Let's prepare to welcome ISKCON of Guyana Hare Krishna Study Center as they bring a drumming presentation. And a student from the University of Guyana. Let's put our hands together for them.
Good morning. Drum from India, from the eastern part of India. Yes. Good morning once again. So this drum is a very ancient drum from the eastern part of India, and it is an integral part of our tradition, the Bhakti tradition. Our tradition idolizes or practices to a great extent musical prayer to God as one of the primary means of pleasing Him, and this drum is an integral part of that. And so we consider this drum not simply a drum, but an manifestation of God's divine energy that we use in His service. So for us, it is very sacred, and we respect it as good as God, in a sense. So I hope that our humble presentation will be of you can have some pleasure by listening to the beautiful songs from this drum. Tere ti tere dagi tere kete taki tere kete tere ti tere dagi tere kete taki tere kete. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that wonderful presentation. Give them a round of applause. So I think the time has come for what we've all gathered here for today, but before we hear from Professor, I would like to call on Ms. Pushpa Samaroo from the Faculty of Engineering and Technology and the President of Guyana, University of Guyana's Hindu Society to introduce our guest speaker.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. It's my distinct honor to introduce Professor Gopal Gupta, an esteemed scholar and a dedicated teacher. Professor Gopal Gupta holds the Joe Dunham Distinguished Professorship in Ethics at Aurora University in Illinois. At Aurora University, Gopal Gupta teaches courses in Eastern traditions, comparative religion, religious and ethics, environmental ethics, business and medical ethics. He's the author of Maya in the Bhagavata Purana, Human Suffering and Divine Play, published by Oxford University Press, USA and India. He also serves as the editor for the Journal of Hindu-Christian Studies, JHCS. The JHCS is a widely read, peer-reviewed journal in the field of comparative religion. He has authored many articles published in academic books and journals. Gopal Hare is a disciple of H. Gopal Krishna Goswami. Professor Gupta holds a doctorate of philosophy in religious studies and theology and a master's degree in science and religion from Oxford University. Let's welcome Professor Gopal onto stage.
Hello everyone, namaste. Very nice to be here today among all of you. It's really a pleasure and honor to visit this very esteemed university, the University of Guyana, and thankful to my good friend Prof Dev for inviting me here. Right now, Aurora University is right next to Chicago. So right now in Chicago, it's about minus 20 degrees Fahrenheit. And this is 80 degrees, so this is... Yes, so I must say that, thank you. The temperature is very warm and the people here are also very warm, so my pleasure. So today's topic, science and religion, is something that's very close to my heart. I did my bachelor's and master's degree in electrical engineering first at Boise State University. I grew up in Boise, Idaho. Idaho is one of the 50 states of the United States, and it has about 100,000 people, the city that I grew up in, small town, very sweet place. And when my family settled there, we were only the second Indian family to move to Boise. So I attended the university there, Boise State. And after completing my master's degree, I wanted to I liked what I studied, electrical engineering, but I wanted to do something that asked the big questions in life, right? That related my science with the bigger questions of life, the meaning of life, how science fits into life in general. So I started searching for a program that would provide me the opportunity to connect these two worlds, the worlds of science and religion, right? Something that I think every higher, institution of higher education needs to provide, because students wonder about this, especially science students. How does this fit in the world that I live in? So I started to look for various programs and, degrees, and I found this program in science and religion. It's a one-year program, a master's program at Oxford University in the UK. That Oxford had just started, and they're one of the first universities in the world to start. And that's where it all sort of began for me, this search into science and religion. So when I saw that, I was like, this is perfect. This is exactly what I want to do. So I went there and I did that for a year. And after that, there's no turning back. So I went on and did my PhD in science and religion and focusing on ethics. And graduated with my PhD. And in about 2014, I then started looking for other jobs, started looking to teach. So my first place where I taught is at Florida Gulf Coast University in Fort Myers, Florida, which is more similar to Guyana in weather. Nice, warm, next to the ocean. And then after a few years, then I went to the University of Evansville at Indiana, Evansville. And from there, then I moved to Aurora University, where I currently hold the chair in ethics. So this topic has come with me for many years. And I love talking about it because I think, as Professor Paloma was mentioning, it's a very misunderstood topic, the relationship between science and religion. And we often ask, are science and religion enemies, strangers, or partners? So scholars of science and religion, okay. So do I switch the slide? Okay, next one. Scholars of science and religion, they have found 4 different ways in which to relate science and religion. We generally can relate these two massive fields in 4 different ways. The first is the conflict thesis, right? And this is the most common impression of the relationship between science and religion, right? That science and religion are inherently in conflict. If you're good scientists, you can't believe in God. And if you believe in God, then don't think about pursuing a degree in science, right? And that's the misnomer, but that's a very common way of relating science and religion. Another way is independence. Thinking that science and religion are independent of one another. You know, they're in 2 separate worlds, but they have nothing to do with one another. Religion is in the world of spirituality and you know, the kind of the touchy-feely questions, and science is more about studying the world. There's some truth to that, but that's maybe not the entire truth. So science and religion are independent. A third way is dialogue, that these 2 fields, science and religion, are in dialogue and they can help one another. And the fourth is integration, right? That science and religion can be closely integrated together and can work together to make a better society. So Albert Einstein, he also talked about the relationship between science and religion. This is a question that the greatest thinkers, some of the greatest thinkers and minds in our history have thought about. Einstein famously said, "The scientific method can teach us nothing else beyond how facts are related to and conditioned by each other. Knowledge of what is does not open the door directly to knowledge of what should be." So Einstein felt that there is a place for spirituality in science. Although he was such a famous scientist, one of the best scientists in the world, Time magazine rated him as the greatest scientist of all time. Einstein felt that science by itself cannot answer the questions about how things should be. It studies the world carefully. It talks about the relationship between different aspects of the world. But we still need spirituality, the humanities, religion, to help us with the questions about values in life. How should things be? And this particular point came in focus, in great focus, at a certain point in Einstein's life. Can any of maybe the students here, can they guess, when was it during his life that Einstein particularly faced this question and realized that science by itself is a neutral power, so to say, and we need the skills and the knowledge to know how to employ it properly? Would anyone like to suggest? Yes. Yes, later in life. Maybe a bit too late. Anyone want to? Huh? Yes, at the end of life is very important. But as part of his career, yes, at the end of life, but as part of his scientific career, there's a moment where he realized the value that's, you know, it used to be that in universities around the world, we had to justify the existence of spirituality, the study of spirituality, the study of religion. We had to, you know, people thought science by itself is an independent field of knowledge. But now people realize the importance of its relationship with other forms of knowledge. And there's a particular point in Einstein's life when this was very clear. We can go to the next slide. He said, "I made one great mistake in my life when I signed the letter to President Roosevelt recommending that atom bombs be made." Right? So this came into focus in his life when he realized he was in the lab, he was making an atom bomb, right? And he thought his science is independent of any questions of value or any responsibility associated with that science. But then he realized that no, science is inherently connected with our well-being, with the rest of the world. It's inherently connected with spirituality because we need to know how to use it properly. So he made this wonderful discovery, but that discovery was used not to help people, but to destroy people, in the case of the atom bomb. So he said, I made a great mistake. Yes, next slide. And today, we are facing these same challenges. You can keep moving forward on that slide. Go to the next one, and then press the button. It'll come up. Yep. So we're facing global warming, military technology, genetic engineering, and nuclear physics. All of these have such profound environmental impact, right? They have such, important questions that they raise. And our entire world, with the advancement of science in the history of humankind, we've never seen such a challenge to planet Earth as well. In the last 50 years, we've advanced incredibly, and in the last 50 years, our environment has degraded more than in the last billion years, right? So all of these big questions are responsibilities, are values, are principles that are associated with science and the use of science. So I'm going to now begin with this sort of introduction about the importance, about this relationship, about the relationship between science and religion. I'm going to begin by looking first at the conflict thesis, right? That science and religion are in conflict. So this is the position that if you're a good scientist, you can't believe in God, etc. So there's a philosopher, next slide, by the name of Richard Dawkins, and he's the Oxford professor for the public understanding of science, and he's also a committed atheist. So you can imagine the professor for the public understanding of science is also an atheist, and so he tends to push this thesis that science and religion are in conflict. He writes in one of his books, The God Delusion, he says, "The universe that we observe has precisely the properties we should expect. No design, no purpose, no evil, and no good. Nothing but blind, pitiless indifference." Right? So this is a quote from his book, and as you can see, very positive, very optimistic here. I actually, as a student at Oxford University, I would sometimes see him riding his bicycle around Oxford University. He's a very angry man, It's like even when he rode his bicycle, he had a big frown on his face. So a very serious man, but well known, and he's of the position that there's no meaning to this universe. It's simply, blind, pitiless indifference. So in the next slide, we see his main arguments. He's a scientific materialist, and he has two main arguments. One is an ontological argument. Ontology refers to what is real, what exists in this world. So he says reality consists only of things discoverable by science, right? Things that are measurable, quantifiable. That's the only thing that's real in this world. Nothing else is real. So it's real if you can measure it in a laboratory, but it's not real if you can't see it in a laboratory, right? So I don't know how he relates with his wife, the feelings that he has. Maybe he can measure it in a laboratory, but my wife would get annoyed if I said that. But yes, only things are real that are measurable and quantifiable. So that's a claim regarding what exists, what's real. His second claim is regarding epistemology. Epistemology is a study of how do you know what you know, right? So it's an epistemological claim, meaning a claim about how do we know what we know. And he says science is the only legitimate path to knowledge. So you can have other forms of knowledge, you can have other paths to knowledge, but if you want dependable knowledge, real knowledge, then science is the only path to knowledge. So everything else is kind of like grandma stories and stories that you hear. It's all imagination. The only real knowledge you get is from science. And he's not alone in his viewpoints. There's other philosophers, scientists like Richard Lewitton. He says the problem is to get the public, that is all of us, to reject irrational and supernatural explanations of the world, the demons that exist only in their imaginations, and to accept a social and intellectual apparatus, science, as the only begetter of truth. So he's saying the problem is that we have to get the whole world, all of us, to reject other forms of knowledge and to only accept science as the begetter of knowledge. So let's look at their claims a little carefully, right? The ontological claim, the epistemological claim. What's the problem, right? What's the problem with the claims of scientific materialism, which is saying that science is the only path to knowledge and that reality are only things discoverable by science? This is what the problem is. Scientific materialists say that only claims derived from science can be true, right? But what's the problem? But that claim is not derived from science. It's an assumption, not a scientific conclusion, and needs to be recognized as such. Right? What does that mean? This means that they're saying that science is the only path to truth, but science itself doesn't say that. Right? Science is good at what it does, right? Science is the study of the natural world in a very systematic, careful way. It doesn't depend on, feelings or thoughts. It's just, it's just a kind of measures things based on what you can see and measure. And so it has a certain methodology that science uses. Science has a particular methodology that it studies the world of space and time, and it doesn't assume any form of supernatural or miraculous phenomena. And that's the methodology that it uses. However, science itself doesn't deny things that may be beyond space and time. Right? Science itself never says that the world that it studies is the only world that exists. There's nothing that may be beyond the world that it studies. Right? So it's just like if I went to London and I toured London and I decided to tour London by only using my eyes. Right? I plugged my ears and I said, I'll just tour London using my eyes. And then I go there and I see all the sights of London. I have a wonderful time, very good. And then I come back and I say, look, in London, no one says anything. There are no sounds in London. No one speaks anything. No one hears anything. Everything there is just things to see. There's no sounds in London. Right? Well, that's because that's the methodology I used. I decided to only use the sense of sight. And that's why that's what I see. My observations will be correct based upon the senses that I use, based on the methodology that I use, but that doesn't limit the world to only that. So science studies the world of space and time using its scientific methods. But now, interestingly, science itself recognizes that there are things that are beyond space and time. Right? So it doesn't deny the existence of realities or ideas or concepts that are beyond our three-dimensional world. Even in rudimentary mathematics like calculus, we talk about sixth or seventh dimensions, right? We've never seen it or can't experience it, but we theoretically talk about it. We talk about dark matter. Big Bang cosmology talks about, before the Big Bang, the Big Bang itself is beyond space and time because the Big Bang produces space and time. We talk about antimatter, right? Black holes. So many concepts in science are begging the question, what's beyond the natural world that we study? What's beyond space and time? So this is the weakness of scientific materialism, that although it correctly identifies the scientific methodology, it leaves out the important place of the dialogue between science and that which is beyond science, science and spirituality, which is happening today, which scientists today are doing. So I'll just end with an example of a very famous scientist who talked about this. And I mentioned Time magazine. Time magazine rated Einstein as the #1 scientist in the world, but I think its British edition named Isaac Newton as the greatest scientist in the world. And most people don't know, but Newton himself was studying, before he studied science, he was studying spirituality. Newton himself was not just a scientist, but he was actually a theologian. Right? Historians of science used to ask, why did Newton the scientist study religion? But once they knew more about him, they now ask the question, why did Newton the theologian study science? Right? Because Newton wrote over 1 million words about God and spirituality. But somehow we don't learn that in our science classes, right? That's something that's skipped. So he was the founder of classical Newtonian physics. Next slide. He published the Principia Mathematica, which is one of the most foundational books in the history of science. There's possibly no more influential book in the history of science than the Principia Mathematica. The Principia Mathematica lays down the principles of calculus, physics, and it was published in 1687. Now, as I mentioned, historians of science now ask the question, why did Newton write this book on math if his primary interest was spirituality? Newton, during his life, studied most of everything that Newton did. He did in the span of 5 years as an undergraduate student at Cambridge University. The rest of his life, he was primarily writing books on spirituality. After 5 years, he had, done everything that we know about Newton, right? The physics and all these things. After that, he got bored with science again, and he started to do his work on spirituality. So in the introduction to his Principia Mathematica, Newton himself answers this question. He answers the question as to why he wrote his book on mathematics. And he says, nothing can rejoice ye more than the fact that it, the Principia, should strengthen belief in God. So, in the introduction to his math book, Newton writes, nothing would please me more than if by reading this math book, faith in God would be strengthened. Now you might wonder why a math book would strengthen someone's faith in God. And for Newton, the reason was because he thought what math shows, what physics shows, is that actually there is beauty in this universe, right? There's a system. You can actually model nature in terms of mathematical equations. There's actually thought and a consciousness and intelligence behind the universe. So his study of math actually inspired his faith in God. And his faith in God inspired his study of science. Newton and those who studied science at that time was called natural philosophy, they believed that God has two books, the book of his words and the book of his works. The book of his words were obviously the spiritual books, the books of God, right? But the book of his works was what? Nature, right? And the study of nature, the care of nature, was also a form of worship. By studying nature, which many of you are doing, you're maybe in the sciences, biology, it was studying the mind of God. And so there's images from that time, and some of the, like Newton and his friends, they had two tables in their laboratories. One was a table where they were mixing the chemicals, and on the other side they had another table. When things didn't work out on this table, and the chemicals combinations were not working out, and they needed inspiration, they would go to the other table, which was what? It was their altar, their place of inspiration. They would pray. And then after some time from that table, they would go back to their, physics table. So Newton famously said, again in the introduction, he says, the most beautiful system of the sun, planets, and comets could only proceed from the counsel and dominion of an intelligent and powerful being. So the point being, not that science proves the existence of God or science disproves the existence of God. But what's the point of showing this example from Newton? The point is that science and religion are compatible with one another. Right? Science itself is a way of studying the world. Right? It's neutral. It doesn't make claims about God. Science itself doesn't make spiritual claims. It studies the world. It's good at what it does. It's a tool. It's a very powerful method to advance society. But science itself can be fully compatible with spiritual practice and spiritual belief. Right? It doesn't prove the existence of God, nor does it disprove the existence of God. It studies the world of space and time. And for most traditions, God, by definition, is beyond space and time. So, in the Indian tradition, therefore, we see knowledge, and now we come kind of to the point that I started with, that knowledge as something very wholesome. Knowledge is not just, this or that. In our modern world, we tend to compartmentalize knowledge. But knowledge is something that is about the entire well-being of a person, which means material knowledge, scientific knowledge, and also spiritual knowledge. So, dharma is the Sanskrit word for values or ethics. Dharma is taught for the progress of living beings. Dharma derives from the act of sustaining. Thus, authorities say that dharma is that which sustains living beings. So dharma, or knowledge, or values, is something that sustains living beings. The conclusion is that whatever sustains is actually dharma. So here it's giving a definition of dharma, that which sustains us is dharma. And this is what Einstein was saying, right? That if we get this scientific knowledge, but with that knowledge we blow up the world, right? We get this knowledge and we make atom bombs and we blow up the world, then what is the use of that knowledge? Right? Knowledge of science and religion are like two tracks of a train. Right? If you want the train to go forward, you need both tracks, and they both serve the purpose of helping us move forward. So I'm going to stop there and seek your comments and questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor, for that discussion. It was such a thought-provoking discussion indeed. You've given us a lot to think about. And it is always valuable to have these conversations. I'd like to acknowledge those persons who are joining us online. We have a few minutes for questions and answers. For those online, you can send your questions in the chat, and I'd like to invite those of you in the audience who would like to, who have questions for a professor. You can stand, and I'll come and bring the mic to you. Me, or you can. Oh, yes, sorry. Yes. Anyone in the audience would like to ask a question? Oh, awesome.
Great presentation. It has been said that religion is the queen of the sciences because of the interrelationship between religion and science. As we know today, that hasn't been the issue. We have a lot of more of the problems and contradictions between science and religion. Can you tell me when you think that break took place where there was this anti-science, anti-God intersection? When do you think that happened? How has that affected us as beings with regards to our thinking about God and about science?
Very nice question. Thank you. So, this was one of the reasons that I brought Newton in, because Newton is undisputably one of the greatest minds in the history of science, Einstein as well. And historically, if we look at, you could say, modern science, right? Science has always existed in different forms, but in terms of modern science that we know today, that literally took birth out of philosophy and religion. It was called natural philosophy or natural theology, historically speaking, where the very idea of the idea of an intelligence or some sort of logical process behind the universe led to the study of science, right? It was these thinkers, these theologians and philosophers, their belief in a God, in a spiritual intelligence behind the universe that led them to explore it. Well, okay, if there's some logic and intelligence behind the world, let me study that intelligence. So historically speaking, this divide was not there, right? In the 17th, 18th century, most of the scientists were theologians and vice versa. But over time, as science progressed, right, this idea became popularized that, well, science points to atheism. Science itself is, it's a field of knowledge, right? I mean, you can be a theist or an atheist and be a good scientist. But this idea that science points to atheism gradually developed over time more. It became more and more popular. But at the same time, even today, there's many statistics and studies have shown that some of the best minds and scientists in the world today believe that their study of science leads them to the idea of God, or is at least compatible with the idea of God. Like a very good example is Stephen Hawking, right? He's not a theist. He doesn't prescribe to any religious tradition. But when he studied Big Bang cosmology and the modern Big Bang cosmology, his quote from his book is, it has clearly, Big Bang cosmology has clear religious implications. Why? Because now, with Einstein's theory of relativity and showing that space and time are relative, Big Bang cosmology is saying that space and time are actually elements in the universe that change. And so the Big Bang didn't happen in space and time, but rather it produced space and time. So then the question comes is, well, what is the Big Bang? If the Big Bang produced space and time, it didn't happen in space and time, then that means the Big Bang must be something that's beyond space and time. Now, the last time I heard, a religious tradition talking about God, one of the definitions of God is beyond space and time, right? So Stephen Hawking says that it has clear religious implications. He doesn't say, well, this proves the existence of God. Your idea of God may be different. We have different ideas of God. But it's undisputably the case that there's some implication here, compatibility here with spirituality. That, well, we've just been starting to talk about this in science, but the religious traditions have been talking about this since thousands of years. What's beyond space and time? So there's one astronomer in Australia, Robert Jastrow, and he says that science has crossed the mountains of knowledge and has come to the final peak. And when it looks over this final cliff of knowledge, what does it find? It finds a band of theologians who have been sitting there since ages asking the same questions. What is beyond space and time? Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. We have a question from our online audience. This question is from Lativia Lewis, and she's asking, how does science and religion differ in the type of question they attempt to answer?
The type of question that they're trying to answer?
Yes, in the type of question they attempt to answer.
Okay, so some people say, it's a good question that they ask. Some people say that science asks the how questions, right? How do things work, right? So I put my food in the microwave, it heats it up. Someone else puts their food in the microwave, it heats it up. So how does it work, right? So science asks the how questions, and religion asks the why questions. Why are things the way they are? So why is it that they work? So science explains that it works. Science is very powerful because it works. But then religion asks, well, it didn't need to work, right? This place could have been, just a hodgepodge of chemicals and molecules with no persons or intelligent beings walking this planet. So religion asks the question why things work in the way that they work. So that's one way to differentiate. It's a little bit of an oversimplification because science also asks the why questions and religion also asks the how questions. But I think it does describe a matter of emphasis, that the emphasis in the science is more about on how questions. And the emphasis in religion is why. Why are we here? Why do we have to suffer, even though no one wants to suffer, right? Why is there something rather than nothing, right? These are questions that philosophers ask. What happens after death?
Thank you. Here's a question.
Hi, good day. Student Charlton Graves. Is religion a good foundation for science, or should a scientist be independent from any sort of religious knowledge?
Nice question. So and the first part was, should someone in religion be affiliated, should someone studying science be affiliated with religion? Okay. Should they use religion as a foundation or should it be independent? Well, it depends what we're studying, right? So if we're studying people, if we're studying human persons, right, then consciousness is a big topic. It's a huge topic. And wherever we start our studies from, we'll be starting from some sort of preconceived notion, right? The point is that no one starts their studies in a completely unbiased way. Thomas Nagel wrote this famous book called The Point of View from Nowhere. And the point of his book is that there is no point of view from nowhere. There's always a point of view from somewhere. So to say that I'm coming from a completely objective point of view can't exist. Because if you're not an atheist, then okay. If you're not a theist, then maybe you're an atheist. If you're not an atheist, then you're an agnostic. But even as an agnostic, you're bringing in your life experiences in. So we can bring in insights from our own traditions, from our own experiences. But the key thing is that those insights that we have should not control the discussion, right? We shouldn't be, we shouldn't let those, our background, our knowledge systems, force a certain conclusion, but we have to keep an open mind. The argument that one can come in completely unbiased without any preconceived notion, that's a false argument. So we all have our religions. We all have our points of view. Even if we don't ascribe to a religion, we have some point of view that we bring to this world. And there's also a famous philosopher, David Kuhn, and he makes this point that actually science doesn't work in the way that people think it works. People come up with good ideas. This is how scientific revolutions take place. They come up first with good ideas. And once they have a good idea, then they try to find evidence to back up that idea. And then if they find the evidence to back up that idea, then it becomes the next theory in science. It takes the next steps. And if they don't, then they drop it. So the mistake is not having some sort of idea. That's human nature, right? The mistake would be if I have an idea and I don't find evidence for it, but I still try to force that idea in, right? So start with an idea, start with your spirituality, but then see where the evidence takes you if you're a good scientist and push it forward. So, I was talked about consciousness and how, so many scientists today, they're recognizing and realizing that in spite of the immense advances of science, human persons or persons in general, living beings, are something more than chemicals, right? There seems to be some conscious element, some mental element, something subtle that's there in addition to the chemicals. And again, it's something that is quite compatible with many of their spiritual traditions. And so they draw insights from other spiritual traditions as well. Yes.
Thank you, Professor. Do we have any more questions in person? Okay.
Good morning. I was actually expecting a much longer presentation because I was enjoying it, and just as I got to the meat or got to a point, I was like, oh man.
We can expand this into a 2-hour seminar, actually.
I would hope that VC would welcome you again the next time you're in Guyana. My question to you is, how do you describe your journey to spirituality? What was your point of beginning? And what is the most profound revelation you've had thus far?
Okay, that's a hard question. Yes. Well, one of the things, as I mentioned in the beginning in my small introduction, one of the things that led me to this was the search for meaning, right? The search for meaning. That, I was very good at electrical engineering. I did my master's in electrical engineering. I could have easily continued that study and worked in that field for the rest of my life. But at the end of my master's in electrical engineering, though I liked it so much, I felt that I couldn't do this for the rest of my life without having some insight into the meaning behind it. Why is it that things are the way they are, right? The same thing, the how and the why question. So in search for meaning, I had the opportunity to study science and religion, the depth of the spiritual traditions in this world, studied world religions. That was part of my coursework, studied most of the world's religions, and studied science and the history of science, the philosophy of science, right? And I think my turning point was the realization that actually it's a greater leap of faith to say that there's no meaning and purpose to this world than to say that there is some meaning and purpose to the world. That the point of view, like Richard Dawkins' point of view, that the world is just blind, pitiless indifference, that point of view is actually a statement of faith, right? Not a statement of science. Because that's a statement of belief. Science itself is not leading him to that conclusion that the world has blind, pitiless indifference, because science doesn't lead you to that conclusion. But that's a statement of faith. That's his belief. That's what he believes in. But for me to believe that, having studied the depth and the beauty of what a human person is, what a human being is, that takes a greater leap of faith than the perspective that actually this world has meaning, it has purpose, and that we're actually spiritual beings meant to love each other. That there is something like true love and true beauty. Because everything in this world, to some degree, questions such as these, you take the evidence, and then from the evidence you come to a conclusion. They require some personal insight or a small leap of faith. But given the evidence, so many philosophers in the history of the world have observed the world, and looking at the natural world, yes, there's things that are bad about it, there's problems in it, but overall, it's a very beautiful world, and human beings are very, spiritual beings. And so it's more likely than not that this world is divine. And Albert Einstein said this, that the greatest mistake, this is a quote from him, he said of the logical positivists who were the atheists at that time, he said, is that they're trying to rid the world of the miraculous. So I think that's my, my big revelation.
Thank you, Professor. We have a question from our online audience, Jonathan Butters. If our universe was created from nothing, how did the structure of our world came and the life was formed?
That's a nice question. If our world came from nothing, how was the structure of the world formed? Yes. Well, again, I think the key word there is if, right? So there's various understandings about how the world was created. And if it was created in that way, then how did the structure of the world manifest? So this is the same question, right? The same question that science is asking, and the same question that religion is asking, and the same question that many of the world's religions are asking, right? The question is the same. The answers differ slightly, but the answers are also similar in different ways, right? So if you study contemporary Big Bang cosmology, I mentioned how scholars today, they say that the Big Bang produced space and time. So the Big Bang must have been something beyond space and time, right? So then what is it? And many Christian theologians, or theologians that come from the Abrahamic traditions, so not just Christian theologians, but those who come from the Abrahamic traditions, Muslim theologians and Jewish theologians, they say that, look, Big Bang cosmology, therefore, is compatible with the creation ex nihilo, that the world is created out of nothing. Because if it's beyond space and time, then it must be, well, it's not in space and time, so it must be something beyond space and time, which is nothing. But at the same time, it's not all nothing, because they believe that there's a God who creates the universe. And this is why, I mean, even modern physicists and scientists today say that Big Bang cosmology is the best theory out there among the scientific theories that are there. That's why it's the officially accepted, theory by physicists. But Big Bang theory itself doesn't explain how the structure of the world manifests, right? It doesn't answer all the questions, right? If you look at Big Bang cosmology, I actually have a slide deck on that. I didn't present it today due to our limited time period. But it says that, 10 to the minus 23 seconds, this happened, 10 to the minus 10 seconds, hydrogen atoms came. Then in 3 minutes, most of all the atoms came about, or the main elements came about. And then about 4 billion years later, you have human life. It's like, okay, well, how do I get from this step to this step? And then there's some steps in between. But it's a description. It's like, okay, this is the best, idea we have there, out there. To me, it's not any more or less convincing than any other description, right? So that's where I think the spiritual traditions also provide insight. That, okay, maybe another option is that there's an intelligence that's guiding this world. That it's not a blind system. It could have happened this way, but it could be that system is guided, right? So you have even evolution. Evolutionary theory is a big topic, and you have theistic evolutions also, where there's theologians, there's practitioners of religious traditions who believe that, well, maybe evolution happened, but even if it did happen, it could be divinely guided, because the probabilities of it happening by chance are very low, right? So these are big questions, and that's why we need to have an open mind. Because the main point is that no scientist can claim that they have the final answer. No one can say that, I got the answer because I produced a human being in my laboratory, right? All, from a molecule all the way there. And a big topic there for modern science is humility in the sciences. That even as scientists, we need to recognize how much we don't know and have humility.
Thank you.
So, I'm a big science buff. And so I read about 3 or 4 science journal articles every night. Most nights, not every night. And a lot of what the traditional science is had purported to know is now being debunked on a daily basis. This morning, this Big Bang Theory is being completely questioned and undermined by what the Hubble telescope is finding, JSW, et cetera, all of these worlds that are very different to our experience of what our cosmos is telling us. Is now we've gone beyond that, et cetera. So this is a very the arrogance of those who only believe that they know everything about that, what is to be known, is just absolutely amazing. But I wanted to ask you this question. It may not be answerable, but I just wanted to get your impression of what is your best description of the divine, and if you think of the divine and God as the same.
Very nice. This is a very deep question. I like this. So, in the Sanskrit tradition, in the Vedic tradition, the tradition that I grew up in, which today is known as the Hare Krishna movement, is the Hare Krishna tradition, but it comes originally from the Bhagavad Gita and the Vedic texts, in that they give a very nice, you could say, it's a very nice non-sectarian definition of God that I think, or of the divine, that I think many spiritual traditions could resonate with. And that is that God is Sat-Chit Ananda Vigraha. A very beautiful term here, Sat-Chit Ananda. And what do these 3 words mean? Sat means eternal. That the divine is something that's eternal. Right? Everything that we see in this world, that we experience, and that science studies is temporary. And so therefore it's fleeting. And so, the sages of the past, they had the capacity to engage in scientific study, but they didn't, because they weren't just so interested in it. They're like, well, what will I do studying the temporary world? I want to study that which is eternal, that which is Sat. So Sat means eternal. Chit means full of knowledge, or the source of knowledge. All knowledge is something that we seek. That's why we have so many universities and colleges around the world, because knowledge is a need of human society. I mean, it's actually the biggest business in the world. Amazon started with books, and now it's the biggest business in the world, right? Amazon, not Forest, Amazon.com I was referring to. So we seek knowledge because knowledge is part of us. Right? And we're part of God, so knowledge comes from God. Chit is full of knowledge. And then the last one is Ananda, or the source of all pleasure or happiness or bliss. So the divine to me are 3 things: eternal, full of knowledge, the source of knowledge, and full of happiness or bliss. And then the last word is Vigraha, which means the embodiment, the form of eternity, knowledge, and bliss. So I think this is also what science is looking for, right? Science attempts for eternal life. It's something like 70% of all science is aimed towards, medicine, unfortunately also military, but it's meant for, defense, elongating our life. Science is searching for knowledge, and science is searching for happiness. This is what human beings search for. This is what they are aiming towards. And I think that's what the divine is. It's the, this is the meaning of the word Krishna also. Eternity, knowledge, and bliss. And the form of this is the divine. In every religious tradition of the world, we see a name for the divine that relates to something like this. You know, the greatness of God, the divinity of God. So eternality is something that's natural to us because all of us are also eternal, right? We are spiritual beings. We are eternal. That's why we don't want to die. If we weren't spiritual beings, we'd be happy to die because material things die, right? But the fact that we don't want to die is something that is opposite to the nature of matter. It's something that is spiritual. And I think that's something we get from God.
Thank you so much, Professor. Thank you, Vice-Chancellor, for that final question. And thanks so much, Professor. Indeed, that was thought-provoking. I know the conversation is going to continue outside of this room. We don't want to keep you long. We know that many of us have a lot of questions, but indeed, as I said, it can continue outside of this room. You can ask your peers. Religion and science is a huge, huge topic, and we can't cover that in 1 hour. I'd like to call a representative from ISKCON for singing of holy names. Put your hands together for them as they come.
So as hinted earlier, Professor just described wonderfully his conception of God according to the Vedic tradition as Satchit Ananda, full of knowledge, bliss, and eternity. This mantra that we're about to sing is an expression of that. We're basically begging God. Hare refers to the energy of God, which we can consider everything around us as His energy, if everything originally came, if the discussion is there, that everything came from God, so technically everything is His energy. Krishna refers to the all-attractive one. God is definitely all-attractive. He attracts all of us. And Rama refers to the reservoir of all pleasure. That one of the definition is that God is full of all happiness. He's the source of all happiness. So this prayer begs God to engage us in His service. So please, if you can follow along, you can join along as well. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Rama, Hare Rama. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Such a talented group. And one of the persons in this group is an alum, UG alum. So I think you can put your hands together for them for that really good presentation. I'd like to call the chairman of the Inter-Religious Organization of Guyana, Prof Dave, to say a few words to you.
Thank you very much, our Master of Ceremony. Just I want to, first of all, congratulate our organizers and our dear sister Paloma ji on short notice to pull off this. It just shows your skill and your team, the skill of your team, and we're very proud of you. We're also more equally proud that you're our front neighbor, and we feel that we can call on our neighbor anytime. But please accept our apology. Next time we didn't really, when he decided to come, we didn't understand. We didn't know, I mean, we know his brother is equally as good as him, but we didn't realize that he is so good. So it's only when he came in Saturday, then I realized all these things. So sorry about that, but I think you know, His Grace Gopal Hari Prabhu, Mr. Gupta, or Professor would have given us a treat. I don't know about you, but I didn't went through a university system, but I went through ISKCON University, but I cannot imagine what's going on in your mind. But the Interreligious, and Sister Paloma would have alluded us to that. The first week of February is the World Interfaith Harmony Week. And because every year we started the launching of the World Harmony Week on the 1st, but because it is the 1st is Saturday, 2nd is Sunday, so the luncheon will take place on the 3rd Monday, which is next Monday, at the Church of Latter-day Saint, that right at Prashad Nagar at the back here. And we would love for some of our university personnel to please attend. This afternoon we'll be at the Teachers Training College. We hope to get some assistance and help from there also. So you're all invited for the launching of the UN Interfaith Harmony Week. And normally we come here sometime within that week also for a little exchange. More pleased that we had a long overdue token for dear VC when she would have visited our temple since 2021 at the 125th anniversary celebration of the founder of the Hare Krishna movement. And this coin was highlighted then that it was released by Prime Minister Narendra Modi. And he came to Guyana and went, and you still didn't receive this, so I'd like to invite you to please receive your token.
Professor Gupta, I'd like to invite you to receive this token on behalf of UG. We've now come to the end of today's session. A huge thank you to Professor Gupta, Gopal Gupta, for coming here and sharing with us today, to our Vice-Chancellor for setting the tone for today's event, members of ISKCON of Guyana, Hare, Krishna, and of course to all of you here and online for being such an engaging audience. And let's not forget the drummers, our talented people who added an extra energy to the program today. As we wrap up, I hope today's discussion stays with you and maybe even spark some deeper conversations beyond this room. Thank you again for being here and have a wonderful rest of the day. We have some light refreshments at the back and there's also some literature. You can feel free to check through the books that we have at the back. Thank you and have a blessed day.